Beautiful people. Welcome to this week's Karma Cards. I've got a great topic to talk with you about, all about allowing and receiving the next version of you. But before I get into that, I just wanted to give you an energetic update because always right now is something magical and kind of strange happening in energy, and I just wanted to keep you up to date. First thing, the Schumann resonance, which was bouncing up and down just a week or so ago, off the charts, right? Blacked out. And this has been happening from time to time, especially in the last few years. We've been seeing these weird little blackouts, but they're usually for about an hour or maybe a couple hours. But this time, the Schumann resonance blacked out for 1 day, not 2 days, not 3 days, not 4 days, but almost 5 days straight. And it just came back on today. So what happened there? Right? Now, I've heard a theory, and I kind of dig this one. So I'm like, yeah, I could go with that. I've heard a theory that every time the Schumann resonance has a blackout happen, what's happening there is that we've changed timelines. And I'm all about that. As long as we're going higher, which I feel like we are, as long as we're going to the higher timelines, I'm all about shifting the timelines a little. So if you think about that, like a timeline shift, and you think about this 5 days, it's like, where did we go? Like, where did the energy go? Now, last time I talked to you, I was talking to you about the next version of you is coming through and the opportunities that have, hair in my mouth, presented themselves so that we can choose to jump in to the next version of ourselves. I'm going to talk to you about that more. I just remembered, I forgot to tell you, that we're also in a high magnetic storm today. So it's interesting that the Schumann pops back on and the sun is sending us a higher intensity geomagnetic storm. Interesting correlation there. And before I get into the next version of you, actually, I feel like I keep leading you on and then I'm like, no, over here. But I just keep remembering and I'm like, oh yeah, and the other thing that's going on that I think people are feeling, a lot of the clients I talk to are feeling this. We're in this retrograde, right? We've got Mercury retrograde. Thanks a lot, Mercury retrograde, for all the technological malfunctions, especially with my mail. That's a new one, but it's based on communication. Mail is, right? So if you're having trouble with mail or packages, thank Mercury retrograde for that. We're also in Pluto retrograde, and we're also in Saturn retrograde. And while Saturn is retrograding, it's also, I gotta look it up again because my brain just went blank. What's happening? Saturn is squaring Uranus. That's the one. So Saturn, planet of karma, work, learning, wisdom, discipline, which is retrograding, so it's all going internal, is squaring with the plot twist planet of Uranus, which is like, surprise, you didn't expect this, look what's coming, booyah, right? Like that's what, booyah, that's literally Uranus talking right there. With these two coming together, what comes to the surface for us is awareness around where we struggle with power, and especially where we've given power or authority away. We're not claiming our own authority. So you might be seeing during this time period your own personal struggles with power or authority, or feeling empowered or feeling disempowered, or awareness around patterns or thoughts about being disempowered, and a desire to claim it back. Focus on the desire part. The desire to claim it back is what you're there for. That's what we're all here for. Claim it back, right? And part of how we can claim this back is about working with the next version of you. See, I knew I could tie it all together. The next version of you, which is here. It's here already. Now we want to work on embodiment. So as far as the next version of you, it already exists. Future you is talking to you all the time. In fact, if I could blow your mind for a minute, your higher self is technically future you, trillions and millions of years from now maybe, but the most evolved version of you is your higher self. That version of you has lived this life already, and all the lives that come next and all the information. It is very, very, very incredibly invested in you getting what you came here for, because you getting it now literally ensures its existence, right? So our higher selves are highly invested in us, working through whatever we want to work through here, gaining information, playing, learning more about ourselves, all of that. Our higher self is highly invested in, because you doing the work ensures its existence, right? So that's why it's always in contact with you and always working with you. So the next version of you already exists. There is a future you that's doing what you want to do and rocking it the way that you want to rock it. So it's not about when does this being appear. It instead is about embodying that being. So today's little chat, before we get into the cards, I just want to give you some ideas about embodiment. Okay, so we just had the new moon total solar eclipse, which was another big portal opening, and stuff is coming in. People are feeling it. They're aware it's there. And what I want to help you do is be more decisive in what happens in your choosing, in what happens next. Really realize that every moment is an opportunity for you to make a default choice, thinking like, well, this means nothing and I'm just going to choose something at random. That's a choice. There's also an opportunity here to make a very conscious choice, a very deliberate choice, which is incredibly strong, especially if you're connecting it to the future you desire. Right? So the future you desire is where that future version of you lives, who's coming in, who's ready to be here with you now. And it's how we receive that version of ourselves has to do with how consciously connected we are to our choices at this time. In fact, I've been working on a podcast for way too long, since January. My podcast has sort of been on hiatus, but that doesn't mean I haven't been working on it in the background. I've just been maybe a little too meticulous about trying to articulate my points. But in that, I'm really talking about choices, because this is where all the power, all that personal power that Saturn square Uranus wants to get you back in touch with, is in the choices that we're making. So becoming more conscientious and deliberate and decisive with our choices can really fast track you to embodying the version of you that you would like to experience now. And you're the driver, okay? You're in control of this. You're the creator of your reality. So that's the cool news, right? The cool news is anytime you want to start, it's go time, because you're making this. I think that what's intimidating is we're never quite sure when to start, right? There's just no clear defined, I start on Monday, this new version of me. It's always in the choices. And it's really interesting because it's not one choice, it's choices, which implies that we have to keep choosing again, and that what we will receive is the culmination of all of our choices. So you've probably heard that metaphor about there's two wolves, right? There's the wolf that represents my happiness and joy, and a wolf that represents my pain and sorrow. And it's the wolf that I feed that will be strongest. And this is in direct correlation with, it's the choices that you make, right? That's how you feed the wolf, every choice. So every deliberate choice that is in harmony and alignment with the future that you desire and the version of you that you desire feeds that energy, and that becomes the reality, right? So when we choose by default, we might end up choosing things that strengthen that probability, that timeline, but we're also more likely to also make random choices that feed our pain and sorrow and suffering. So let's talk about a couple of ways that you can increase the embodiment of this next version of you, who, like I said, who's already here, already living a beautiful life, and all you have to do is line up with that version. Okay, so number one, and this is one of my favorites. I like tactile things as a person who loves to use her hand as an artist. I want tactile. I want to have it in my experience now. And one of the best ways to do that is to choose a talisman. So you may have noticed this baby right here is pretty much in every Karma Cards video you see. I also, it's a big chunk of clear quartz as a ring. And I also wear this every time I do a spirit circle, every time I do a reading, anytime I'm doing something that feels magical or I want to be more deeply connected to spirit, I wear this ring. It's a talisman. So a talisman, just in case you're like, well, what is a talisman? A talisman can be a symbol, it can be an object, it can be a garment that you endow with properties that create a magical being, a magical force, basically the next version of you. Does it have to be specifically related to magic? No, it does not. It can be related to joy. It can be related to sensuality. It can be related to power. It can be related to protection. A talisman is different than an amulet, though. This is an interesting distinction. So amulets are a type of item that you wear to ward off negativity or evil, right? It protects you. It protects you. A talisman, though, is an active seeker seeking that which you desire. And that's why I love talismans. So as I was saying before, a talisman can be anything. And it's all about intention. Remember, you're the creator being. So I want a more magical and deeper spiritual connection. And I have created my talisman or my magical item. It works like an indicator. And what it does is it literally tells my brain, because I've wired it to, that when this is on, I am more deeply connected to my higher self, to my team in spirit, and to the etheric world because of this talisman. Now the beauty is when I first put this on, it had no programming to it, right? I had to put it on, I had to tell it what I want it to do, and I had to keep coming back to it. But I tell you what now, I don't even want to do a reading unless I'm wearing this object. So I want you to think about what is a quality that the next version of you already has in spades, right? Is it confidence? Is it a being state, right? Like more calm, more centered, more peaceful? Is it joy? What is it the next version of you has so much of? Okay, so that's number one. Find the intention. Number two, you want to find an object. Now this one can be really fun. And you know what? We actually do this automatically anyway. For example, wearing a wedding ring, right? That's a talisman as well. It represents the union that you have with your partner. Wearing a certain color of lipstick, right, represents a feeling state of sensuality or feeling powerful or bold, right? Wearing glasses can represent mental concentration, the ability to focus, higher knowledge, learning, studying, right? All of that. We already do this. However, most of the time we do it by default, and the item sort of gets to be the one that leads us rather than us programming the item. So I want you to pick an item. Now, a good item to pick is something that has a long life or is sustainable, so it can be easily repeated. For example, jewelry. That's why I have a jewelry shop that offers items like this, because these things can be put on again and again. A cosmetic item works really well, like lipstick, because even if you run out of the color, you can buy it again, hopefully, unless it's discontinued. But a shade of red would mean to the brain powerful, confident, bold, right? So when done with intention. What's an item that's not quite sustainable? I was trying to think about this when I was thinking up what to talk to you about. And I was like, you know what? A pair of socks, you know, like lucky socks, like people sometimes use things like that as a talisman. Those aren't quite as sustainable unless you were to buy several pairs that represented that same energy. So let's say like my husband has a pair of socks with jackalopes on them. If he were to make that his talisman, it would be better if he bought several pairs, because obviously socks wear out, socks go missing, so not quite as sustainable. Whereas an item like a silky robe or a cape, I mean, even superheroes do this. I mean, like, we're so indoctrinated and deep in this understanding. It's all in front of our face that we don't necessarily realize that we have access to something more powerful, because it seems so mundane. But I want you to think about superheroes like Wonder Woman, one of my favorites. Wonder Woman, her talisman, the things that give her a sensation of being Wonder Woman, at least the first thing that comes to my mind are those arm bracers that she wears, right? The pew, pew. Her arm bracers. She doesn't wear those all the time, but when she puts those on, you know she's Wonder Woman, and so does she. So this is the power of picking a talisman. And then once you invoke the intention for the item and you've chosen the item, then this is where you engage with the item. So the first few times that you're going to engage with your item, you might feel like this is just a big chunky rock. It's pretty, but I don't think it's doing anything. The item it does two things, right? It absorbs the intention. So the more that you wear it, the more you think about, this is why I'm wearing it. But then it also starts to seek alignments. It starts to bring things to you. It acts like a seeking object, and it builds in intensity the more you engage with it. So I've been engaging with this ring for a few years, and because of that, the energy that comes off of it is quite palpable. And I feel it, like as soon as I put it on, I'm like, yep, my brain is like, we're in the zone. I know what we're doing. I know what this connection means, and I know what's coming through. And it just helps to push past all those feelings of uncertainty and doubt, because there's so much energy built up in the talisman that we use that it allows us to start deeply embodying this. Now, one thing I do want to say is that, the talisman helps it happen. But were something ever to happen to this ring, if this ring were to break or go missing, I would not feel like I've lost access to anything, right? Because what I've actually done here is I've used an item and an intention to build up a neural pathway in my brain. So that's the science part of it. That's what's going on. You've just built up a neural pathway. Nothing can take that away from you. So it's not the item necessarily that gives you power. It's the item that gives you focus and clarity and reminds you and keeps you intending and choosing what you originally intended. So I just want to give you that back, because my intention in sharing this with you isn't for you to give your power away to anything else, but rather use those things with intention, with purpose, to train yourself to think in a certain way, to train yourself to feel like Wonder Woman or bold or empowered or magical or whatever it is you're seeking, right? And know that every time that you engage with that object, you're only bringing more intensity to that feeling. And eventually, you might not need it anymore or want it, but it will help allow you to embody the next version of you. And then the second thing I just want to bring up, which is kind of along the same lines, is the idea of opening up to receiving, right? And this is actually a message that came through loud and clear in the last New Moon Spirit Circle, but we got this very clear message about opening up more to receive. And this goes hand in hand with embodying the next version of you. If we're waiting for some kind of cue from the outside world telling us that you're going to receive something now something comes in, that can also be disempowering, and it can train us to wait for something to happen. And again, the disempowerment there is when we're waiting for the universe to give us something or gift us something, we forget we're the creator. And when we forget that perhaps the universe has heard us already and has made the manifestation to order. But the reason why we're not experiencing it is because we haven't opened up to receive, because perhaps we're just waiting. We're waiting for the sign. We're waiting for proof. We're waiting for the evidence. And that's not necessarily, again, how it works. Many times it's like you have to believe it. You have to decide it to allow it in. This goes along the lines of the observer effect, which is, something that they have discovered in quantum physics, that what we observe about something actually creates it. So by opening ourselves up more to receiving, we're actually creating it, right? It's funny. It's the brain wants to do it backwards. The brain wants to see it and then it'll go, okay, now I can have it. When in actuality, you have to open up and be like, I have it. And then it comes in. So here's another tactile way that you can enhance the feeling of receiving. Now, for some practices, for people who practice with, like witches who practice with cauldrons, the cauldron represents receptive energy, right? And you think about it, the bowl represents receptive energy as well, or the chalice or the cup. All of this is that divine feminine energy of receiving. So a tactile way that you can do this, and it works incredibly well with your new moon intention and also during the period between the new moon and the full moon, so that 2-week window, is put a bowl out, put it in a sacred space. So if you have like an altar or a special shelf or just somewhere where you put your sacred or spiritual items, put a beautiful bowl out, just a little dish, and write what you intend. This is what I want. Write it down and put it in the bowl. And as you're putting it in that bowl, practice feeling receptive. Like imagine that as you drop that note into the bowl, you are dropping the energy into you. So as the bowl receives the paper, you receive what you intend. Try that practice and see how it feels. And know that you can do it as many times as you want to, right? Because what you're doing is you're trying to wire in a feeling of receptivity, a feeling of allowing and receiving. And with that, before I forget, this Friday, June 18th, Friday, June 18th at 4:30 Pacific time, in my Patreon group, I will be doing a live art and meditation group session. So what these are is we gather together live, we do a little meditation, I take you through an art tutorial, and this one is connected to what's called a charisma spell. So charisma adds to your ability to receive. So there's receiving and there's charismatic receiving, which is that highly potent magnetic energy. So we're going to be doing a charisma spell where we're focusing on enhancing that beautiful magnetic energy. So if you add these three talking is hard. I'll try again. If you add these 3 things together, the talisman, the bowl of receiving, and the charisma spell, you are wiring this beautiful new energy to come bursting forth, like beautiful flowers exploding into blossoms. So if you are interested in joining me there, you can go to patreon.com/Blythe Starlight, all one word. That's patreon.com/Blythe Starlight. It's $10 to join us, and you get a lot of bonus extras as well. And if you want to stay a Patreon member, then you can get a new lesson every month. So if that sounds interesting to you, check out that link and join me on Friday. And now let's get into karma cards. So for those of you who are new to karma cards, let me quickly go over it with you. I have 3 decks here: the planets, signs of the zodiac, and houses of astrology. And I've already asked my team, what is the message you have for us this week? And On my cards appears two sets of answers, one in red, which means action, and one in blue, which equals outcome. And all that you have to do is tune in intuitively and decide whether you need action-related answers right now or outcome-related answers. And many times people want to choose both, and you can definitely do that. All right, while you're tuning in intuitively to see which one you need, let me tell you the timing of this reading. This reading is for today, June 16th through Wednesday, June 23rd. Now, the flavor of this reading, we have the dreamy planet of Neptune, dreamy, spiritual, introspective Neptune, in the sign of Gemini, which is where Mercury's retrograding, and it's the season we're in, and this is all about self-expression. In the 8th house of transformation. So the 8th house is one of those tricky houses because it has to do with beginnings and endings and deep intimacy and understanding with ourselves and others. All right, so for those who are choosing action, your spiritual action at this time, inspire others with what you want to be known as a life or death issue. So again, I feel like this message right here is all about what I've been talking to you about, which is, what do you want to be known? Most likely, what you want to be like known or remembered for is the higher version of you, right? Your potential, your best foot forward. I don't think anybody ever dreams about being mediocre or half-assing it. Like no one wants their legacy to be like, oh yeah, she really like put her life on hold for a long time. Like, that's not really what we all think about when we're thinking about, what do we want to be known about ourselves. As a life or death issue, when this comes up, all it's saying to me is like, what are you waiting for? Right? Like if you were to die tomorrow, what would you have wanted to have done today? What would you have liked to have gotten through, gotten over, have known, right? So many times we're waiting. I catch myself waiting all the time. Here's one of the ways that I wait, and I'm actively working on breaking this habit because I'm like, what am I waiting for? I have had a habit in the past of buying myself something nice. So, I know some people have a hard time even doing that for themselves. So it always feels like kind of a win when I do it. I'm like, I did it. I got myself the shoes I really want to get, or I got myself, the beautiful top I really wanted to get. So I'll do that. But then I'll shelve it. It'll go in a nice little box. It'll get hung up in the closet. And I especially seem to do this with clothes. I do it with a lot of nice things, but clothing in particular. And I will sit on that thing. I am embarrassed to say that I still have outfits that have tags on them because I'm like, I'm waiting for the perfect moment. It's got to be the right time. The circumstances have to be right. And when I sort of shook myself out of it and I asked myself, what are you waiting for? Like, it dawned on me that I'm the one who creates the special event. You're the creator, right? We are all the creators. This idea that some special event is like hovering out there, coming towards me, it's a little bit of like a mental, it's one of the ways we can disempower ourselves because we put it out externally. Something out there is going to happen, and that will give me the opportunity to finally engage with things that make me feel like special or loved or luxurious or just, appreciated by myself. And I realized, holy crap, what am I waiting for? Well, this version of you, are you putting it off? Are you putting it way too far in the future? Like, I'm someday going to be that person. Well, why the hell can't you be that person now? As a life or death issue, like, let's pretend this is the last week. Would you continue living in the way that you live if you really thought it was the last week? Or would you be like balls to the wall and be like, F it. I'm going to put on the dress I like. I'm going to wear the shoes I got. I'm going to engage with my life in a way that feels satisfying. I'm going to stop putting myself on a shelf and waiting for something. I know I'm getting like all excited. It's just when this shows up, it's like, it really is the message right now. Like, there's nothing to wait for. Make it happen. Mental action. Be prepared to sacrifice for what is believed about getting and using power. So when the word sacrifice comes up, I don't know about you, but I have a tendency to go, oh my God, it's asking me to give away something I want or I like, and I have to sacrifice something. I have to sacrifice comfort or happiness. Yeah, you might have to sacrifice comfort, but it's not the kind of comfort that's the good kind. It's the kind of complacency, right? The comfort of getting used to, like I said, I got used to putting stuff on a shelf and waiting, and that started feeling comfortable and right. It actually feels really uncomfortable to take those things out and engage with them because I'm like, my brain's like, it's not the right moment. What are you doing? Like, what are you? Like, I can't believe you're going to use this now. Today's just like a Wednesday. How dare you, right? Where that's not comfortable. But in order to move into my own personal power, to really move into that sense of like ownership and confidence and grounded in who I am going to have to sacrifice some comfort. And it's interesting with comfort because our brain, or at least my brain, says comfort is being snuggly and warm and on the couch and hugged and, you know, the things that feel soft and friendly, but we don't really consider comfort with our complacency, with our procrastinating, with our putting things off, with our resistance, because those things are also painful. They're not happy comforts, they're painful comforts, but we still choose them because they feel safe, and that's a false sense of security. Like, we're like, I'm safe here. If I don't get too big, if I don't expect too much from myself, then I'm safe in this space. And the truth is, you're going to have to sacrifice that to live the life you truly want to live. You're going to have to let go of some of that negative comfort zone. And that's what I get from this. Physical action. Yielding is the only way to use the quickest way and use other people's resources. That's always tricky. Other people's resources comes from the 8th house because, again, it's about what we share as well. So yielding, surrender, is the quickest way to use other people's resources. When I hear it in this context, I really feel like it's the resources are how to build off of someone else's experience, which is also a shared resource, right? We have teachers, we have mentors, we have coaches. And I know that many people, including myself, we invest in these type of people hoping to make that shift. In fact, we're relying on our coaches or our mentors' resources. We see them as people who've gotten through the thing we ourselves want to get through, and we're relying on their resources. What's interesting though is even when you invest your time and energy in something like that, you're going to be met with your own resistance. That person is going to tell you stuff that is going to take you out of your comfort zone and force you to shift, right? And that's when that resistance comes up of like, no, I'm miserable but I'm comfortable in my misery, right? And it's like, I'd rather be comfortably miserable and feel safe than be exposed, vulnerable, and raw, but also living my best life. It's tricky. So surrender to the fact that, yeah, you're gonna have to do that. And it's the fastest way to get what you want. So combining your surrender with the knowledge of other people, with a book that teaches you how, with a webinar, with an interview, it doesn't matter what it is, but surrendering to the fact that this person is doing something different and that's how they got the life you want, right? If you're not experiencing the life you want right now, you've got to change something in what you're doing, because that current approach you're using is not going to get you to where you want to go. If it did, you'd be there already. That's how you know it's not working, right? So I know people don't love it when I throw out the surrender word. It's one of those words where I get a lot of eye rolls and at me, and I feel you because I feel the same way, but that is the quickest way. So I'm just going to leave that there so that we can all absorb that together. Now let's go into outcomes. So for those who are choosing outcome with Neptune and Gemini in the 8th house of transformation, your spiritual outcome at this time, the idealization of information to explain personal power, right? So what I get from that statement is like, I sense that when people hear this, that mentally and cognitively, theoretically, you're 100% behind it. You're like, yep, I totally get that. Yeah, got to get out of my comfort zone, got to sacrifice that, got to step into who I am. I get what you're saying. It's going to be uncomfortable. All of that's like locked and loaded. You've heard it before and you understand how it works. And you might even be like, I love that. That is so empowering. That idealization though is not the same as embodiment. And that's an area that I've gotten caught up a lot in my past. I'm like, I get it up here. So where is it? And it's not the same as bringing it down. You got to bring it down through the mind, ground it all the way down into the body. When it's in the body, that's when you shift. Mental outcome at this time. Confusion regarding communications about the mysteries of life. Okay, so I have a feeling that this particular confusion, again, comes from that resistance. And also, like, the more we're stuck in our head, right? So the more the mind is trying to drive our car, the more resistant the mind is to how things work. Because the way energy works is more esoteric than logical. And that drives the mind nuts. And so trying to logically understand the mystery of life, like how life works, like how energy works, how you actually have to conceive it and believe it to receive it, right? The mind is like, I don't like that. I decide what I want and then the world gives it to me somehow, right? Like it shows up and then I get it. That's what the mind wants. So there's going to be this little push-pull battle between you trying to embody the next version of you and your mind fighting it. The mind believes that things happen in a very sequential order and it's all linear. And it's not true. You work in a spiral, just like energy, just like time, just like the flow of the universe is a big spiral. So what it looks like is you moving into something, but then coming back to yourself to move into it and come back. And as you go deeper and deeper, and the whole experience becomes more potent. Mental confusion in the next week about how this works, or the mind fighting the knowing, right? Because the knowing is not in the mind. The knowing's in the being state, in the heart. So trying to explain it, especially, let's say you're moving into embodiment. You're like, yeah, I get it. I want that. I'm going to embody. I'm going to go with the flow, just like Therese is saying. But then you're trying to communicate. Someone sees you doing it and goes, what are you doing? And how are you doing it? You might have difficulty trying to continue to share it to somebody else because it's a process that, again, defies logic. You can feel it when it's happening, but you can't necessarily communicate it. And there's a reason for that. It's called the veil of confusion, because you're not supposed to do someone else's work for them. They're supposed to do it. So there's always this mechanism trying to protect us. So for example, if you're listening to this and you're like, I was with you up until blank, that would be the veil of confusion at work right in there, intending that you pick up the pieces you need and everything else sort of gets wiped so that you can figure it out, right? So if you're trying to communicate it to other people, you might have difficulty. Don't take it personally. You're doing it. They're going to do it in their own time and place. Physical outcome at this time, sacrifice resulting from the fluctuations of a major change. Now, I talked about this last week, about what happens when major change happens, and it seems to be forced upon you. So some changes that happen in our lives, we're all about it. We're excited. They feel good. Other changes feel like, why is this being thrust upon me? And we get so resistant to the change that we use all of our energy fighting that change. And what I said last week that I want to remind you of this week is, instead of fighting the change, see it as the opportunity it is. When something fundamentally changes in your world, that fundamentally changes your environment. And your environment is an outward reflection of you, of the inner you. So when your outer environment fundamentally changes, it also means you're changing on the inside, but it's a window and an opportunity for you to fully jump in. Like, you want to lean into that window, and you want to do it intentionally. And what I'm doing is I'm using the future version of myself that I desire to be now, and I'm realizing, hey, the world opened up a window of change. It wasn't a change that I desired, but it came anyway. So I'm leaning in, and I'm like, intentionally, I'm going to make changes now because it's easier. So if something happens in your outer world or external environment that's a shift that wasn't of your own design, allow yourself to process whatever emotions come up for you, but try to keep in the back of your mind that this is a golden opportunity to allow the next version of you forward. It's going to be faster, and there's going to be more ease and grace because an opening has been made. And with that, I hope I see you Friday at the live art and meditation group, but if I don't, I hope you have a beautiful week, and I will see you next week for Karma Cards. Mwah. Bye. Thank you for watching. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so that you know the next time I release a new video. Until then, stay magical.